The Love of Pleasure, Special Dangers from Thoughts for Young Men, written by J.C. Ryle. Another danger that Ryle warns the young man against is the love of pleasure. To quote Ryle from page 23, youth is the time when our passions are strongest, and like unruly children cry most loudly for indulgence. We are not to be slaves to our desires. We are not to be slaves to our flesh. We are not to be lovers of pleasure. We are to be slaves to Christ. We are to be slaves to righteousness. We are to be lovers of godliness. Surely this warning is needful for us to hear. The young man is so easily led away by his wants, his desires, and his love for pleasure. Pleasure itself is not inherently sinful, yet when a man is ruled and governed by his pleasures, he is quickly led astray by his deceitful heart. He is quickly taken captive by the desire of his eye. Therefore, we must love God above all other things. He must be our chief desire. Christ must be where we find our greatest joy and pleasure and satisfaction. If this is the case with us, surely all pure and undefiled pleasures will flow. Yet we must be diligent and guard our hearts. Ryle answers the question, why is the young man prone to love the sinful pleasures of the flesh? Death to him seems afar off. Strength, vigor, and health currently belong to him, and he spends them how he wishes. The time of youth is often not weighed down by anxieties or cares of consequences. It is rather governed by emotion and wrongful desire. This so often causes a young man to forsake duty for desire and neglect holiness for his temporal happiness. Truly, Ryle concludes, many young men can accurately say of themselves that they serve lusts and pleasures. We are to take careful attention to this warning of the love of pleasure that may so easily take our hearts captive. It will do us great harm. Such things as drinking, gambling, gluttony, and many other activities have ruined a great many number of lives. More than merely the physical life, however, Ryle points out the danger to our mind and emotion when on page 24 he states, all things that give a feeling of excitement for the time, all things that drown thought and keep the mind in a constant whirl. You see, young man, if our joy and happiness is only fulfilled when we indulge in worldly amusements and pleasures, we will soon be disappointed. If our minds are encapsulated with the love of pleasure, we will be too filled to consume the things of God. That is, however, exactly what the devil wants, isn't it? To fill our minds with vain thoughts, to busy our body in vain pursuits, and to make us only concerned about what fleshly enjoyment we will delight ourselves in next. For if this is our chief concern, when will we think on the holy character of God? When will we delight in the great love of God in Jesus Christ? When will we labor to share the gospel with a dying world? O young men, let us think. Let us not be distracted by vain amusements. Surely there is time for enjoyment and merriment, but it should not be our life, nor should it be our chief delight and drive in life. The longer and more often we give ourselves over to the love of pleasure, the more we will find ourselves controlled by it. We will find our minds seared by them. We will find our hearts clinging to them. It is important to note, as the Lord gives liberty, not all things are helpful to us. Some earthly things may not be sinful, yet is it helpful? Is it good for me in my walk with God? Let the Lord give us a clear conscience as we are led by the Holy Spirit in such matters, and let us bring the body into subjection. It must also be noted that these temporary bouts of happiness caused by fleshly pleasures are ultimately empty and waning. Ryle states on page 25, all is not gold that glitters, all is not good that tastes sweet, all is not real pleasure that pleases for a time. Go and take your fill of earthly pleasures if you will. You will never find your heart satisfied with them. What a depressing, yet true reality. Young men give their lives for these things. They rejoice in these things. They ground their happiness in these things. Yet they prove themselves profitless, and they leave the sad soul in a greater state of misery than he was in before. They never truly satisfy, and they leave a greater void than what was originally filled. They truly are deceitful. The devil is glad to see a young man lost in these things. Yet the one and only loving God is calling you out of such deception, out of such poison, out of such sorrow and destruction. And He is calling you to Himself. He is calling you to Christ. Before Ryle closes, he desires to target specifically the immoral sin of fornication and adultery. Sex before marriage is a heinous sin, and yet it is a sin that the culture today rejoices in. Young man, this sin will mar you. It will abundantly pollute you. It will scar you in a way that other sins will not. It will grab your heart and crush it. It is a sin that even David succumbed to, and we see the dreadful result. Young man, flee from fornication. Avoid even the situation where you may be tempted. Do not even speak of this union between a man and a woman in a perverse way. Keep your eyes pure, for surely lust always begins there. Make every effort to avoid this most destructive sin. Put up every safeguard needed, for it will surely bring about great sorrow to the young man who commits it. If we are to walk in the right way, if we are to be lovers of God more than lovers of pleasure, we must cling to Christ and His Word. Young men, hide yourselves in Him. This surely is the only way we will overcome the evils of the day and mortify the deeds of the body.